So, all credit to Amazon shipping. I have a box.
What's in your box?
That, if it's what I assume it is, judging by the price on the label, I ordered this, well, really early in the morning on the 26th local time, because time zones are a real thing. So it's the 2nd of December. So in 6 days, actually I didn't get the shipping notification until
Thursday or Friday.
Thursday or Friday. So saying if it was Thursday, our time, which is Wednesday night, stateside time zones, then this box made it here in like 4 days.
Go Amazon.
That's impressive.
We won't mention that I ordered stuff before he ordered that and I still ain't got it from Amazon.
I've got tires I ordered a month ago that still ain't here.
Oh my, Chuck, what is that in your box?
It's a surprisingly skinny box with a Ryzen 9. See, right, where is it? Right there, 3950X. Don't get too close, I won't focus. Hopefully that focused, and I've got my badass CPU, which it's too late tonight to put it in there and start testing, so I will get to that later this week. Alright, bagels and baguettes, we're here for what is possibly the final assembly. This is my box with the temporary 3400G processor in it, which is actually going to be eventually moving downstairs into my media PC because more power is more better. On that thread, I've got the new hotness. Haha. If this thing will focus on it, that is a 3950X Ryzen 9. 16 cores, 32 threads of maximum AM4 superiority. I'm going to get into this thing, take the CPU block off, clean all the old paste off of it, mount that one, and then I've got some Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut, not the Conductonaut. The Conductonaut, the liquid metal, is supposedly corrosive to aluminum, and I've got an aluminum liquid cooling system, so that would be a bad idea. But the Conductonaut, which is the Cryonaut, which is the regular thermal paste version, supposedly is not. So I'm going to go with that, and hopefully we'll get the best heat transfer into the loop as possible. And I am hoping to manage a 4.2 to 4.3 all-core clock. I'm going to aim for more like 4.3, maybe 4.3 and some change. But I'm going to get into that, and we'll see what comes up. So, I've got everything put back together, wired up. We're going to turn it on and see if it turns on or if it bursts into flames. Either one is equally as likely with me. Turn the TV on. Oh, it helps if I actually turn the power supply on. Alright, fans are spinning. Let's see, LEDs running through its cycle. Oh, I got a boot light. And we're in the BIOS. All right. So if you can focus on that. Actually, that's way too far away for that to focus. Let me see if I can get it here. That says AMD Ryzen 9 3950X. So it sees the CPU. It has set the base clock and the RAM to the minimum speeds. So this is where I get to do the oh so fun part of configuring the BIOS and running through the overclocking settings and all that, which is even more boring than watching me put stuff together. So I'm going to work on that. I'll be right back. So I am going to try and do a split screen here between me sitting here and what's actually on the screen. But I have got Windows installed, updated, mostly all that good stuff. and I'm getting around to fine-tuning my overclock. Right now I have it set at a 4.25 overclock. That's with 16 cores, 32 threads. And I discovered that I ran into a small problem. Wasn't immediately apparent though. So if you can see what I got going on here, sitting at idle here, I've got a idle temperature of 33-ish degrees centigrade. Oh, it just jumped up to 40. So about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Cores are sitting here at 4.25 megahertz, all core clock. That's what I was going for. What I've got open here is Cinebench R15, which honestly is almost a joke on this CPU because you hit run and it just chews right through that. Now, if you watch, that jumps up to 78, 77. It got up to about 80 degrees C, but that test only took about 10 seconds, so it doesn't really generate enough temperature to hold it there very long. So that's R15. Let's go for something a little bit more strenuous. We've got, there we go, R20. R20 is a bit harder to render. So you can see in here, I've rendered this before and got a 9962. I actually got a 10,003 one time. I think it depends on the temperature of the CPU. But if we run that one, let it get started here. Again, 4.25, 100% CPU usage, 78, 79. This one you can notice takes a lot longer to chew through, but it's still chewing through it very quickly. And that's just sheer amount of CPU threads. And we just hit 80 there. Now, I do remember reading that AMD said that these CPUs are capable of running in the 105-ish degree C range, and they're designed for that. That's their heat envelope. They're supposed to be able to go up to, I think it was like 109 or something like that. But obviously you don't want it to run that hot. But as you can see, my maximum temperature that I got up to during that test was a 80 C. At this point I wasn't too concerned. Now what I've got here is an application called PowerMax. If you've ever heard of CPU-Z, their site also has a couple other things. One, this CPU ID hardware monitor that I'm using. Great app for checking all your sensors. They also have one called PowerMax, which is a short-term stress test. You can do like a 1-minute stress test to see if your machine is just going to bomb out as soon as you hit the button. Under the CPU test, it has two methods. The SSE test, which is the older one. See, and if I start that, again, you'll see the CPU count slams up to 100%. Now we're 86C. What worries me is the liquid cooling system I got. Even though I've got two 240 coolers running water through to dissipate heat, because the fluid gaming system is designed as an all aluminum system, the heatsink that has to get the heat off of the CPU and into the water is also aluminum. Aluminum gets rid of heat faster, but it does not absorb heat as fast as copper, which is why you normally find like air coolers that have copper blocks and then aluminum fins. Unfortunately, you can do that when they're dry. When they're wet, you cannot mix metals. You cause corrosion, and you don't want corrosion in your liquid cooling system. So 88C, that wasn't worrying me that much. So I'm gonna give this a second to spin back down. As you can see, the temperature's dropping quickly. But so we're back down to 40, the high 30 Cs, which is back where it was idle before. What concerns me is if I take this to the AVX CPU test and hit start, that immediately jumps to 90 degrees C. There's 100, there's 104. By now the fans have spun up and it seems to hold at about 103, 104, there's 105, 106. I'm gonna go ahead and stop that. That is higher than I want that to run. So apparently I'm running into the limit of the amount of heat that the CPU can get into the liquid system. So now I've got to, actually I think I'm gonna break out a quick resolve test and see if when I render a 4K video, is it gonna run more like the SSE test and just get in the 80s, which is doable, or is it going to be like the AVX test and jump up into the hundreds, which is no bueno. So that's what I'm gonna get into in a minute, because I have Christmas presents, although I'm halfway through January at the moment. My mother, bless her soul, bought me a 1 terabyte
SSD NVMe. So using a part that I already had, which is a little 16x NVMe converter, I'm going to pop that in, and that will give me a 1 terabyte drive to use for media and game storage to go with my 2 terabyte RAID for a scratch disk. So one thing that will do, if you're a bit tech nerdy, is due to the limitations of this board, it has enough PCIe Generation 4 lanes to run at full speed 1 graphics slot, so 16x, and the 2 NVMe slots, which is what I bought it for. Actually, it has a third one, but that one runs off of the lanes that are dedicated to the, it used to be called the South Bridge. It's just the board chipset, I guess now. Even though it has an additional 16x slot here, it does not have the lanes to support dual 16x. If I plug anything into that slot, it's going to drop it to 8x and 8x. Now, fortunately, because this is a Gen 4 capable graphics card, AMD baby, that 8x is as fast as the 16x for Gen 3. So I should not lose any performance render-wise or game-wise by installing this in this second slot with my drive here. So I should get the full 4x Gen 3, because this is a Generation 3 drive, and 8x on the Gen 4 graphics card should be smooth sailing. All right, so what we've got here with this part is our Intel 660 drive, our little adapter here, and this comes with a heatsink and some thermal pad, which is good because the Intel does not really have any. Let's pop this open. Oh, yay, and not drop it. That's always a good thing. So, slot the key up. This is a M type, which means it's NVMe, not a SATA solid state. All right, now we got this little bag here that comes with a screwdriver and what is one of the most irritating screws in the history of computers. These little things do not fit anything but the M2 slot, so you can't replace it with anything else, and if you drop it, they're almost impossible to find. There we go. All right, so screw that down. It's nice and flat. If you had a shorter one, not a 2280, but like a 2260 or something, they do provide in the little bag here some mounts so you can mount those up. And there's a spare screw in case you do drop it. I just ordered this off Amazon. I don't even remember what the brand was. Some, let's say low-cost variant. So I'm gonna measure my tape. Oh, that's actually just the right length. Goody. This is always the hard part, is getting the sticky off without tearing the whole pad up. There we go. Let's make sure that gets right in the right spot. All the way down, make sure we got good contact. Don't squeeze too hard, you don't want to crack anything. Now, this should have a second. The good thing about this is the way this board is oriented in this case, it's going to go that way anyway, so even if it's not sticking real well, at least not yet, maybe it takes a little while to adhere well, it won't fall off because it's facing up. All right. Stay down. And that's going to walk it all the way down. All right. Then we get a little heat sink on there for good measure. And because this doesn't require a faceplate or anything, I don't even have to take the shield out. I can just pop this right in. All right. That was probably the easiest thing so far. Now, that being said, I've got to start this back up, make sure that configured, make sure everything's still working correctly, and I'll be right back. All right, so what I've got on the screen here is a quick little thing I slapped together in DaVinci, just a couple of 4K files from where we stopped to eat somewhere. And I'm going to start a render here, and I'm going to see what it does to my temperature and my cores here. Here we go. 63. We are not really stressing too many cores here. There's one at 0%. There's, actually, I'm gonna open Task Manager here and get a little better. I'm running at about 40% utilization, doing 4K video with a light color grade in faster than real time, because it's a 24 FPS timeline and it's rendering it 30 to 35 frames a second. So that's only heating it up to about 66C, which is good. I think I can keep my speed, and I think I just need to dial in my voltages a little bit. Right now I've got it running at 4.25 at 1.36 volts, I think. Let me see if I can see my voltages here. V-core. And it is currently pulling 1.352. I can go in here and see if I can pull this down a little bit. I've heard of people getting 4.1, possibly 4.2 at about 1.29, 1.3 volts. 4.2 seems to be about the highest that an all-core overclock works really well without using a lot more power. So I'm gonna see if I can down this to about 1.325-ish, maybe, and keep it stable. But that's the boring part. I'll be right back. All right, so I have done a little bit of tooling, a little bit of working. For those that are worried about the numbers, I've got it still running at 4.25 gigahertz at 1.275 volts, which is pretty good. As a test, to make sure it wouldn't crash, I imported one of the videos that I've already done and posted, but a, 6 minute and 50-second video rendered in 5 minutes and 49 seconds. So it rendered in faster than real time because the timeline's 24 FPS. It was averaging between 25 and 30. So if you average that, say 27 frames per second, and on my old machine, which is at 4.2 gigahertz, but only 4 cores, 8 threads, I was getting between 9 and 11.5 frames per second. So it's at least 2.5 times as fast. Strangely enough, possibly because I'm using the free version of DaVinci Resolve, it was only using between 45 and 50% of the CPU resources. So I've got a lot of overhead here. Technically, I could have gone for, I believe it's the 37 or the 3800X, which would be the 8-core, 16-thread CPU, and probably gotten very similar results, but probably been in the 90% CPU usage. But tell you what, I'm okay with that. I got a badass computer. So one thing that I have noticed, let me minimize this down here, or actually I can close that out. So our little stress test program from before, when I run the SSE, the temperature here will jump up to about 77, 78 C, 76. And at the 1.275 volts I have it at, this will run stable. Obviously my DaVinci Resolve will run stable at this. I don't think it got it over about 64 C, which is perfectly good. So this will run the entire minute of the stress test with no problem. So let me stop that and I'll let this cool down again real quick. While that cools down, one thing that I did notice is that the LED screen in here, which throws your trouble codes, when your machine is on and running actively, is also a CPU readout or a temperature readout. Because, 42C, 42, the things you figure out. Anyway, so now we're back down to idle temperature. I'm gonna change this over to the AVX. Start this up. This will jump up to about 95 before the fans catch up to it. 92, all right. 91. So now it's holding stable at about 92, 93 C, which, if you remember before, it was hitting 104, 105. So that's 12, 13 degrees C cooler, which is good. But it is unfortunately not stable. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. The last time I ran that test, it got to about 65, 70%, and then the machine just rebooted. If I wanted to, I could probably bump the V-core back up to 1.2875, I think is the next step up, and probably get it to be stable. But I don't think anything I'm doing on here is going to cause it to hit that heavily. But if it does, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Or just to be sure to fix my voltages. Anyway, so now I'm gonna get down to running some benchmarks on this. and I'll give you guys the sweet, sweet results. All right, so I've pretty much done my benchmarking. I don't really want to try and go below 1.275 because that's honestly one of the lowest voltages I've heard of anybody being able to get it to run stable, much less at 4.25 gigahertz. Anyway, so I'm buttoning this up. I have run all my benchmarks. I will show those here in a second. Some minor thoughts. My tubing for my kit here, I ran the tubes from the water block to the outside ports on these radiators for reasons I'm not sure which. But that means that these hoses hang slightly out, and when I put the cover on, I kind of have to bend them in. Doesn't hurt anything, it's just not the most efficient of routing. They could stand to be maybe an inch or two shorter, and if I ever have to drain the loop, I will probably move these two to the inside ports, so that'll pull these hoses in a little more. Airflow is running good. NVMe's are running good. They got the face plates for the ones on the board, and this one's got its little heat sink on it. Depending on the benchmark that I ran, the 3400G, which I put in this board in case while I was bench testing it, versus the 3950X. In most of the gaming benchmarks, the Haven benchmark, 3D Mark, that sort of thing, this did better, but it didn't do leaps and bounds better. In the Vinci, it was a noticeable difference, but I noticed that during Vinci, it never really got above 50% CPU usage. So that may be something to do with the fact I'm using the free version. Whenever I get around to upgrading to the studio version, maybe I'll get better results there. Maybe it'll scale a little more with the extra cores, but it seems past about 16 threads, it doesn't really get a whole lot more benefit. That being said, when it got to the benchmarks where it was not thread limited, namely the Blender benchmark, oh boy, the Blender benchmark stomped it. Don't know what else to tell you on that, guys. I spent a lot of money on a CPU, which I'm only really going to get full use out of 50, maybe 60% out of most of the time. I could probably render something and then do something else in the background now. But I'll have to be doing multiple tasks at the same time for it to go anywhere near getting full usage out of all these cores. But I'm going to button it up and I will get it live on my desk soon. And that means I get to move my other one over and set it up for the Melissa for when she needs her computer stuff so she's not using my old laptop. Because the hardware shuffle. All right, everybody. Welcome back to my desktop. We're actually on this side, actually. So, it has been a few weeks since the last part of this video was. I've had to do a little more troubleshooting. I was having some issues with, the random application crash, some instability, so I had to do a little more troubleshooting. So, if you'll notice over here, I've got my clock set down to 4.15. I did have it at 4.25. And that did run, and it ran pretty good until it didn't. And then it got all unstable, and you'd have to do multiple reboots. And so, thanks to a video from Actually Hardcore Overclocking about getting the most out of a Ryzen CPU, I found that there were some settings in the BIOS under Precision Boost Overclocking that I could enable that would allow me to set some sort of board voltage limits. I took his settings that he said were relatively safe because I was going to trust him on that because he seemed to know a whole lot more about that than I do. But with those settings and another setting that I saw in that video, I found that I could run the vCore on my machine down at 1.2, which is less than the 1.275 I was doing before. So if you can run the vCore lower and still keep the system stable, then you produce less heat. As a quick example here, I'm going to pull up the SSE test from before and start that up. As you can see, straight to 100% CPU usage at 4.15, but our temperatures get up to about 69 C, 70 C, which, if I remember the video before, they were getting up into the high 70s, low 80s. I think it was a 78 to 80 range. So let me go ahead and stop that. Now, the other test, the AVX, is a little bit more sketchy, especially when I'm running OBS here capturing video. It may crash out, so we're going to give it a quick try. Alright, and I'm just going to let this run for a few seconds. Alright, as you can see, it got up to about 81C there. Alright, I'm going to try this again and let it run a little longer and see if my system doesn't crash out. So 80, 81. Alright, so it seems to hold there. No need to tempt fate and see if it crashes my machine again. But that 81, 82C is a whole lot lower than the 94, 95 it was before, or the 105 it was before that. So, with these settings, I did get my voltages down. My speed, I lost a little bit. I went from 4.25 to 4.15. Even at 4.175, I was still a bit flaky, but 4.15 seems to be a bit stable. That is probably due to a limitation in my all-aluminum liquid loop there. How often do you get to say that you've run into a metallurgical limit? So just the aluminum, I do not think can get the heat off of the CPU IHS and into the water fast enough. Otherwise, the precision boost levels it down. I tried running it completely on precision overboost for a while to see how that did, and I would hit 4.7, technically 4.699, which is the advertised speed of the chip, but I also would have a problem that if I ran anything that did like all cores, because it couldn't maintain whatever temperature envelope it was trying to with the aluminum system, it would throttle itself down to like 2.8, which is not 4 gigahertz. So I had to figure out how to manage that. So anyway, thanks to the videos of Anthony from Linus Tech Tips on overclocking a Ryzen 3000 series, and the video from Actually Hardcore Overclocking on the power board limits, I've got it relatively stable and running pretty good. And I'm going to put in the benchmarks, but there's also going to be this system at 4.25, which was what I originally had it at, and then there's going to be this system at its final overclock stable settings. So, if anybody's stuck around this long watching this video, thanks for being a big tech nerd. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Enjoy the benchmarks. We'll see y'all next time around.